Chemistry, characteristics of elements in the periodic table. Understanding the periodic table. As a student of chemistry, it is important to understand the periodic table. The periodic table is organized into columns called groups and rows called periods. Scientists use the properties of each element to place these elements that have similar properties in the appropriate cells of the rows and columns. The first piece of data that was used was the atomic number, which was discussed in earlier videos. The elements are arranged in ascending order of their atomic numbers. The second piece of data that was used to arrange the atoms was the number of electrons in the outside orbital or shell. If you will look at the periodic table, you will find that every element in group 1 has the same number of electrons in its outside orbitals. Group 2 has the same number of atoms in the outside shell, and the pattern continues. The third piece of data that was used to arrange the atoms according to the total number of electrons in the outside orbital. For example, lithium in period 2 has 1 electron. Beryllium has 2 electrons. Boron, if we jump over, has 3 electrons. These are called the valence electrons. Since this outside shell is called the valence electron shell, we will use the number of electrons to know how to join atoms together to form either ionic or molecular compounds. This is very useful information. Next is the name that has been assigned to the certain groups according to their physical and chemical properties. On our periodic table, each group is shown in a different color with the name provided. The first and second groups and some elements found on the right side of the periodic table, as shown in light blue, are called metals. The elements shown on the right side in yellow are the nonmetals. All element position in the periodic table tells us then, or the scientist, the physical and chemical properties of elements. Now this summarizes, this is important, metals are shown in a aqua color, nonmetals are shown in yellow, and another category called metalloids are found in green. We will use this data in the next video. So what are some properties of metals and nonmetals? How would we know the difference? Or how did they determine how to classify them? Well, if we're looking at metals, normally they're solid at room temperature, except for mercury, which is a liquid. Their appearance is shiny. They are a good conductor of heat and electricity, and they are malleable and ductile, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Nonmetals, some gases and some solids. Bromine, which is a nonmetal, is a liquid. They're not very shiny. They're poor conductors of heat and electricity, and as solids they are brittle and not ductile. Metalloids share some properties with metals, such as maybe shiny, solid at room temperature, and some properties with nonmetals, brittle and not ductile, poor conductors of heat and electricity. The atomic mass is another characteristic that we need to know. This represents the mass of the atom from which, given the atomic number, we can determine the number of neutrons found in the nucleus. Other important information can also be found on the periodic table. See if you can find some of this extra information. Coming up next, atoms versus molecules. Stay tuned.